Welcome back to the Lanterne Rouge cycling podcast with Benji Naesen. On this Thursday evening, we're recapping Volta Ciclista at Catalunya Stage 4, the last big mountain stage, as well as OxyClean Classic Brugge de Pana women's race. We had the men's race yesterday. We'll do it in normal order. Catalunya first, then Brugge de Pan second. Before we get to the recap, I want to mention, well, one of the teams that are in Brugge de Pana and got another top 20 result. The British Continental team drops Le Col powered by Tempur. You know that Le Col is the show partner of the podcast. They're making us, making things possible like Benji and I possibly getting race footage for next year and an editor so that Benji doesn't have any more nightmares like yesterday. But Le Col, their support of the pod from the Giro last year and all through this year really make that possible. They've got a pedal and rewards program. You can only sell £50. Believe that's, quick maths, $80, maybe more, AUD, and being with a chance of winning a Drops Le Col team bike courtesy of Ribble Cycles. You can see that through their Instagram or their website. There's the various information and links there. Got to Catalunya, Benji, the last big mountain stage, 169 Ks, about 4,000 meters climbing, 2 HC climbs. The first one's a Cat 1 for a break to form. Second, then it's a long descent, false flat descent. Then second climb's like 25 Ks, 4.5%, not steep. Then descent, then the Port and a finish up to 2,000 meters, 18.5 Ks at 6.7%. What's your feeling, Benji, before the stage for the percentage chance a break would win? I was at about 75, 80%.
I think I had it pretty high as well. It would all depend on who would go in it and so forth, but I think I had the breakaway as a high potential to win this stage. It kind of depended on what teams were trying to do against INEOS in this stage, and I think that really played out at the start of the stage, but I did think that all in all, INEOS would retain their leader jersey for sure with Adam Yates, but also would be interested in potentially trying to get rid of Almeida a bit, because we saw in the early mountain stage yesterday that Thomas was looking pretty decent. Almeida was also relatively decent, but I still think that Thomas was in a shape where he could drop Almeida yesterday, which means that perhaps today that could happen. So I think those are all the things that we were looking at. Could INEOS make it a 1-2-3 and with the breakaway end up winning the stage? And the stage pretty much started with what I was expecting, how I explained how the stage would start, the sense that the INEOS riders go to the front of the peloton, and from that point onwards, they decide who can go and who can't go. And it started with 2 riders getting away. I think that included the likes of Diego Camargo, and I don't know who the early other riders was, but I think then just after that, a 6-man group got away. That group got taken back with Volta in there, and then another group got away, and that group was the final breakaway. But the first thing I noticed was that, one, it was pretty strong, but who was in it? Leonard Kemna. And if we know about Leonard Kemna, he's on 140 or something, 131 or so in GC before this stage. So there lies an issue, because he's basically neutralizing the breakaway from the inside. I was super hyped that Volta was in the breakaway, but it was never going to work out if someone with 130 deficit is in the break, because then INEOS going to start pacing, really. What do you think was going on in his mind making that move?
I just think Leonard's strong on back-to-back mountain stages, as I said in the preview. And I think Leonard's big mistake this week is he's fluctuated between riding for GC and going for stages, and he's lent a bit more towards going for stages. We saw that with his decision making at the end of stage 1, and then he's kept close on GC, and then today he's really hamstrung the break. If we're honest, we had riders like Tolherk, Uran, Antonio Pedrero, and Samitiev from Movistar as expected in there. Clement Champoussin, Koen Bowman, Joe Dombrowski, Thomas de Kent. I think he's even won this stage on this finish before from the break. Volta and Meinke's. But yeah, that meant INEOS was going to pace it all day, and that's exactly what they did. On the second climb, with about 50 Ks to go, maybe a bit over, I think live coverage was starting at about that time, we turned on, and Leonard's on his own. He's dropped the brake on that second climb, and I think it's very early because there's a pretty, still an 8K valley after that climb and a long descent. To be staying away from a full INEOS team. He had a gap of 3:30, and it was Castroviejo pacing hard on that second climb behind him, just eating into that gap gradually. Not really on the climb, actually, more so on the descent afterwards. It was, God, listen, if anyone before 1 April keeps asking me why they super tucking, aren't they going to get fined? And like, it's not banned yet. I thought people knew that. I can't take it anymore. So everyone, like, you had Leonard super tucking, Castroviejo and Dennis super tucking, and Benji. I thought he still had a chance because I thought INEOS wouldn't pace so hard. So they get to the base of the last climb. Leonard's on his own. Brakes mopped up. Castroviejo's done. Did you expect INEOS to get Dennis to start driving it really hard with that gap at 155 to Leonard, given that Yates is already a minute 30 ahead of him on GC?
Yeah, I think that's where they lost me a tiny bit when it comes to INEOS. I think that in total, the moment that Kemna got away from that group, he started slowly but surely gaining time on that second group. But I think at the bottom of that second climb, at the descent bottom, we had that 155 gap, but it had also been at like 3 minutes suddenly for a bit, which was weird because first it was 1 minute 30, then after 3 minutes, and then they started bringing it down. So I'm not sure if they kept their foot off the gas for a bit or what caused that gap to go up for that at that moment. So that was a fun surprise to me because then they will have to like eat in the gap more afterwards, and that was noticeable. They started eating into the gap, and when the climb started, it was Dennis time. 155 minute, 1 minute 55, not 155 minutes would have been a huge gap. I think that is still the gap where I would pace with the likes of Dennis because Camina's virtually in the lead right now. So I would have kept that gap up, and the moment that it switches, I would leave my foot off the gas a tiny bit and would try and keep the gap the same. And I think they didn't do that because we saw that Dennis kept on pacing on the same wattage that he started pacing on at the start of the climb. So I think that's not necessarily a mistake because, well, it could still turn out their way because they've got a godlike team anyway. But I think that spending unnecessary energy at this spot for Dennis to go into this gap even more. And that's when I was thinking, well,
hold that
perhaps
thought, Benji.
Okay. Yeah?
I'll hold that thought. I'm going to ask you a hypothetical about it after we've done the recap. We're going to imagine some Slovenians might be at this race. Leonard gets wrapped up with 14.5 Ks to go on the climb. It's an 18K climb. Leonard was out there on his own for a long time. Great effort from him. He at least tried to make the stage exciting and make INEOS work for it. But yeah, I reckon he's a good shout actually for the stage when on stage 7, given how aggressive he's been. Friend of the podcast. It was time for, Dennis kept pacing. He just kept pacing quite hard. I actually think I didn't notice him taking the foot off the gas. We thought he would have. They've got Yates, Port 1 and 2, Almeida 3rd. Almeida's zero threat on the mountain to INEOS. They know that. Their only real threats are Kelderman, Simon Yates, but they're very far back on GC. So if any attacks are to happen to eat into that gap, bear in mind this is the last mountain of this week's race. It's going to have to be soon. 10 Ks to go. No, sorry. 12 Ks to go or so. Dennis pulls off. Big turn from him. We'll see more of that in Grand Tours this year. He's invaluable in the INEOS train. Carapaz. People were saying after yesterday's stage, it doesn't look in so good form. It's like, well, no one looks in good form if they have to bring back 3 or 4 attacks every time someone surges. They've got to go after them. Valverde, Quintana. He starts pulling incredible pull from Carapaz, keeping it together, lining it out. But then he had a mechanical, Benji. I initially thought he was pulling
Yes.
off. And then how surprised were you that he just like rode straight back up the side of the peloton after he got his chain back on?
Well, it was a bit weird how he went over the front first, because he just went to the right side of the road, and it looked like he didn't inform anyone of his team, because they were both like, "Are you okay? What's happening? Are you okay?" And then he probably like pointed out, "It's my tire," and he didn't take too much to fix itself. I think, was it his chain? I think it was his chain.
No, it's chain.
So yeah,
chain, pretty sure.
Well, I didn't expect him to be done with his work yet, but it's also pretty majestic to then step up and fly back to the back of the group, pass everybody, and start working again. Thomas took over for a tiny bit in the meanwhile, not really setting a high pace, so he was probably thinking, okay, we're gonna try and get Carapaz back to try and get this train back in order, but really powerful, and didn't really stop there because Carapaz kept on pacing and he kept on pacing. And
well, Kreuzweig attacked.
Yes.
So when Carapaz had the mechanical, Steven Kreuzweig, a minute 37 back on GC, attacked as Carapaz was making his way back up. I love to see it. Benji and I hate the unwritten rules. And like literally you think, oh, what's the unwritten rule about pacing when a domestique's had an issue? Chris Froome once made the whole race sit up to wait for Ian Stannard to come back in the Tour de France. Chris Froome actually went back himself to bring Stannard back. So I love micro-aggressive things in cycling, and this was definitely one of those little jabs from Jumbo-Visma. I mean, ultimately, it did not work at all and was, in hindsight, a terrible idea for Kreuzweig. But I don't think there's much love lost between Jumbo-Visma and INEOS. Carapaz just started pacing, as Benji said, bringing Kreuzweig back. He was literally dangling 10 meters in front of the INEOS train the whole time. You know, INEOS train is undefeated. And we know that Carapaz, he's got two nicknames. Obviously, you know, El Jaguar de Tulcan. That does not apply to this race. That applies when he is in attack mode. Today, he has his original nickname, is it Locomotora del Carchi
yeah.
or Lomotor? Yeah.
I don't care. Local.
The train. He was the train today on the front of the INEOS train. Monster pull from him. Chavez attacked him with 7.2 Ks to go. He showed good magic legs, in fact, yesterday on stage 3. And Carapaz, he did his best pulling for ages and ages deep into 3 Ks. And I want you to explain, Benji, why didn't INEOS pace to bring Chavez back?
Oh, the Chavez, we have forgotten to say that he attacks. Chavez attacked.
Oh, no, I said.
Oh, okay. Well, there's a reason to that. So, you've got a situation where Chavez does not matter at all when it comes to GC. The man can take roughly a minute and it still wouldn't matter for INEOS here. So, what they're looking at is their GC right now. They have Adam Yates in first. They have Bode in second. They have Almeida in third, which is not their teammate, obviously, and Thomas in fourth, only a few seconds behind Almeida. So what they are thinking is what I mentioned at the start of the podcast today, that what if they could drop Almeida and keep Thomas in that train? So Thomas was not really the rider they wanted to let do too much work here. They wanted to keep him relatively okay so that he could stay on and hopefully he could overtake Almeida in that, because imagine if they could finish the stage with a 1-2-3 in GC, that'd be amazing. And it would probably matter more to the team here as a bit of a meme than Yates winning another stage. So Chavez got 10 seconds, 15 seconds, 20 seconds, and Carapaz kept on pacing until another move came, and that was the first proper Movistar move today after Soler dropped again at the start of the final climb doing nothing today. It was Enric Mas. Enric Mas who attacked, and he's got this special way of attacking in the sense that when Enric Mas is attacking, it's like he's using all his core muscles in his body to not move at all while doing this.
Yeah, I know.
That his body is not moving, but his bike is moving. It's so funny to see. But yeah, he got a bit of a gap, 5 seconds on the peloton, but Carapaz
And he
kept it
always
on the
comes
same
from so
tempo.
deep.
Yep.
Like,
It's like
he
he's
spends all
spending
his
half of his
biscuits
energy.
so, like, just getting to the front wheel.
Yeah, it's a bit of a, I don't know. Is the weird strategy? I don't think anybody would have really countered it, or yeah, it's not like he attacks with the
No, Ineos
fiercest
didn't
of
care.
speed anyway. So Ineos wouldn't care, and if anybody else would care, they would also do it here because, well, they've got enough time to react with the speed of the attack, the acceleration that Enric Mas uses against this peloton. But eventually, Carapaz slowly but surely tuned that back, and Carapaz went over the front of the group, and it was time for the Australian, the Tasmanian, to move to
Oh,
the front of the group.
oh, Thomas, I think, like, soft pulled for a little bit, or just keeping it together. And bear in mind, Ineos, as Benji said, were just focused on, I think, dropping Almeida and putting him into difficulty. Chavez was gone, 13, 15 seconds ahead. He eventually cruised in for the big stage win. Esteban Chavez, his last win was in May 2019 in one of the late Giro stages when he was out of GC contention. So hasn't won for nearly 2 years and got the big W today ahead of the Ineos train. But this Ineos train, still undefeated. Yes, Port's not working sort of as a domestique, but riding in the fashion that he did meant no one could attack from the GC group to put them under pressure. It dropped Almeida, and then Thomas was able to, move up spots on GC. So, and take 4 bonus seconds. So here's the stage results. Esteban Chavez first, 7 seconds ahead of Woods. Mike Woods, Jesus, what a result. Best
Yeah.
climber on Israel Startup Nation. I'm not even sure Froome can help him in the mountains in the Tour. Geraint Thomas third for Ineos Grenadiers, taking 4 bonus seconds and leapfrogging ahead of Almeida, who lost a fair bit of time, not just bonus seconds. So Thomas is now third, 15, 14 seconds ahead of Valverde in fourth. No change with Yates and Paul 1 and 2. Koos just behind Yates in the same group as with Valverde, Port, Kellerman, Quintana, Lucas Hamilton, all in that group. Hugh Carthy dropped, lost 6 seconds. I'm actually a bit disappointed in his results at Catalunya, if I'm honest. Simon Yates, 12th, also losing 4 seconds to Carthy and 17 to Chavez. Almeida, 25 back. Ciccone, 30 back. So, death, taxes, Ineos train. Listen, all the people that wrote articles spouting the bullshit Brailsford was saying after the Giro about new tactics, we love to race exciting. Like, just because Ineos fell backwards into a Giro win where the start list was, accidentally the Giro Sicilia start list, and they just were like, oh, why not go for it in week 3? Doesn't mean when they got someone in the leader's jersey in the Tour this year or any race this year, they aren't just going to train it up. And that's what they're going to do. And that's the correct thing to do. It works. It's worked in cycling for decades, and they're not going to change it. They only change it or will change it if Yates and Port or Carapaz or Bernal are behind on GC to better time trialists like Pogacar or Roglic. If they're ahead on GC or doing good TTs, there's no need to be aggressive or overly aggressive unless Yates yesterday you want to put the time into Almeida and you're behind. So it was same old Benji, and you tweeted something about Ineos and gifting and Chavez, somewhat related to what I just said about the train. Do you want to explain that? Because I agree with you. Explain it to the listeners.
Yes, first to add on to your discussion a tiny bit, I agree that they also don't need to change a winning strategy in this sense, because if they're in a situation like they are right now, the best way to play the reins is to ride it defensively if you've got a 1, 2, and a 4 in GC. So they did that, and perhaps it's more boring than people seeing attacks every single time, but obviously Ineos prefers to win over making the race exciting. I would too if I was them. So I definitely completely
Yep.
understand what they are doing, and I don't blame them for making that choice. And I enjoyed the race, so can't say too much more than that. I think my tweet was more related to the fact that we saw Paris-Nice a few weeks ago, 1 week and a half ago, where Roglic made the decision to leapfrog Gino Meder at the end of the stage, and the entire half of Twitter was pitchforking him. But I think today was the perfect example of why Roglic should not do that. Give the victory to Gino Meder. Because today we see a situation where INEOS they're obviously kind of trying to get Almeida off the wheel and keep Thomas in there, but they also know that if you, with 700 meters to go, drop Almeida, and Thomas is still looking pretty good, then it's very unlikely that an attack in the final 700 meters by Adam Yates is going to destroy everybody in that front group and make Almeida pass Thomas again. That's unlikely. So they were completely having the possibility of attacking there to try and overtake Chavez, who was up the road a good 12 seconds or so at the end of the stage here. They could have done that. They chose not to.
Well, he only won by 7.
Yeah. And nobody in the world is going to see this as a gifted victory by INEOS.
No.
Nobody in the world is going to see that as a victory given by Adam Yates. They see this as a victory by Chavez, who survived the group behind. And this is why Roglic should have done and overtaken Meder, because if he did not leave Schachmann behind to make this move in Paris-Nice to try and catch Gino Meder, then nobody would have seen it as a gift, just like today. And nobody would have given him credit. And Gino Meder and Bahrain wouldn't have ridden for him in the last stage. And from this stage, you won't see Chavez and Bike Exchange suddenly working for Adam Yates in the Tour de France. Yeah.
Oh, man.
This is
well, Chavez works with his own teammates, so let alone Adam. Now he's on a different team. But yeah, I agree 100%. Adam Yates could have definitely won this stage or come damn close. So that's why you don't gift stages. And it's not a gift. Chavez was, after Adam Yates, the best climber. He's been the best climber in this race. You look at Enric Mas trying to get a gap. It's not so easy to just ride away from the INEOS train. And he didn't. He beat it for the stage. He didn't put much time into it. That's how the INEOS train works. But still, you looked at Kreuzfahrt attacking when the pace was low, couldn't hold it. So it is really good to see Chavez being a top climber. If he can hold this sort of form throughout the rest of the season, you'd be expecting him to win some mountain stages throughout the year, depending on where he goes. But my hypothetical, Benji, was, which I wanted to come back to, by the way, INEOS 123 GC, this race is done. Everyone, by the way. But my hypothetical relates to later. Carapaz has a mechanical. We have Thomas, Port, Yates, all there sort of on GC, Yates leading. None of them the clear domestique. Maybe it is Port. Pogačar and Roglic attacks. What do INEOS do? Just pace with Port?
I think that it's very difficult to figure out what INEOS would react to, because in this situation, looking at how Pogačar and Roglic rode the last 2 weeks, I would see them just dropping everybody when they attack. So I would not know how INEOS would be able to react to this, knowing that their entire strategy at Tirreno was just being played with by Pogačar. So I don't think that Carapaz puncturing at that moment or anything would matter. I think that in the end, they need to figure out a way to strike Pogačar and Roglic and not the other way around. I don't think it's up to Pogačar and Roglic to make the move now. I think it's up to INEOS to make the move against Pogačar and Roglic, because otherwise they won't win the Tour de France.
See, I think pacing with Port is a dangerous option. We saw on stage 9 of the Tour, if those two go pacing with someone who's not as strong as them, is a dangerous game. I think the leader has to back themselves, and Adam Yates just would have had to try to bridge to them and then sit on. And that's still a good strategy, because if Pogačar and Roglic attack, the strongest climber on INEOS, whoever they've got, can bridge. And then unlike last year where Bernal worked with them win stage 9 break, he worked with them the whole time. Unlike that, Yates, if it's Yates, can sit on and say, hey, I've got Thomas and Port behind. Screw you, sit on. And then you can attack them later. They might stop working. So it's a lot better for INEOS. And I think that would be the play. I don't think pacing, unless you've got like prime Wild Poles or 2013 Richie Port or something, is the play in that scenario. But really, food for thought. Unfortunately, Kreuzweig wasn't strong enough to really see what would happen with 5-7 Ks left in the climb. But that was our Catalunya recap. I hope you enjoyed it. Pretty surprised a break didn't win today. Leonard might get some dirty looks from his breakaway companions because INEOS wouldn't have given two shits, I don't think, if he hadn't been in that break. But anyway, that's the way it goes. I love him for trying. I was hoping he was going to have a 60K solo. Would have made for a great Instagram montage.